talking to Carlton about all his adventures. So, Carlton, say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Really good, not too bad. Nice Saturday morning, getting ready for a nice weekend.
Great. So, where are you at the moment?
I'm in Berlin at the moment. I'm based in Berlin, Germany.
So, you're not from Berlin, are you?
No, I'm a Londoner. No, I'm from the UK. So I moved here about 2.5 years ago. We came over just to see how the city is, and then we moved here permanently in January this year.
Okay, and do you like it there?
Yeah, it's a wonderful city. Really love it. At the moment, the part of Berlin where we are now is called Spandau. It's sort of in the suburbs on the edge of Berlin, and yeah, it has everything that we're looking for from life at the moment. So yeah, enjoying it.
Great. So before we go into more depth about Berlin and your work, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? You said you're from London, but what made you move away? What you do for a living? Just a little bit about your lifestyle and how it happened.
Sure. Living in another country is something that separately both my wife and I had thought about for a long time. I kind of dipped my toe in the water previously with, like a student exchange. I went for 6 months to live in another country in Turkey, and also with my work spent a few months here and there living in Croatia. So I'd already kind of tried it a little bit, but I wanted to experience it like full time. You move your whole life to another country and have a big adventure, and it's a bit scary and exciting and stuff like that. Yeah, and my wife had thought the same. So we were looking, first of all, we wanted to leave London. We were looking for places in the UK. Then when we talked about it and realized we both were interested by another country, we started looking further. We thought about Bulgaria for a bit, and we decided Germany in the end, and then we came to Berlin.
So why did you decide Germany would be a good place to move to?
Want to live in Central Europe. I think where we are now is a fantastic location. You have lots of really interesting countries around with amazing history that it's really easy to get to from here. In the UK, you're kind of, you're on an island, so you're kind of isolated, and it would be nice to live in the continent, we thought. Germany in particular, we've both been to Berlin before. 2 or 3 times, and we both kind of fell in love with the city for our own reasons. And when we realized that we had that in common, and we were also looking for, having both grown up in London, a city that is also diverse, multicultural, but has that same kind of excitement and energy that you get from a big city. And so Berlin felt like the perfect place.
That's almost like the London of Germany, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, a few people would argue maybe it's not even Germany, really. It's kind of doing its own thing that doesn't have very many what you would consider, even by German standards, stereotypically German characteristics. It kind of does things in its own way, as you might expect given its history.
Yes, of course. And if I may ask, how old were you when you moved to Germany?
So I'm 37 now. When we first, like I said, came over to check out the city and stay for a few months, I was 34, and then we just moved now in January, so I was 36.
Okay, so you're still young. Of
Yeah,
course.
I think so. I'm frequently told by people I play football with and others that I'm not anymore, but yeah, I would like to think so.
And then, do you have any friends, or did you have any friends before you moved there, or any family? You said you checked it out and you decided, but do you actually have anyone there to help you move and work?
Yeah, we knew people here already. I think Berlin is I'm reading the book at the moment. It's called City of Exiles, really about Berlin's kind of spirit and how through the years it has always had people coming and going and experiences it as a place of kind of adventure away from their home, if you like. And so I've had friends who lived here before and then left, lots of them. And then at the moment, we also had, you know, 3 or 4 friends who were here already. One of them went to university with my wife, for example. And so, yeah, we had a couple of people who were already reference points for us, and we could, you know, crash on their sofa, you know, in the early days while we kind of figured things out. And yeah, that made things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I assume. Did they help you to find a job as well, or did you have already something set up before you moved there?
No, so our work allows us, thankfully, the freedom to move around because you know, we work remotely, both of us. So my day job is I'm a web developer, front-end web developer, and I've been working with the same company for over 5 years now. So it was something that, you know, when I came to the realization, I started the process of talking to them, like, how would it be, you know, if I work from home a bit more, and then, you know, kindly got them kind of slowly got them used to the idea of me working remotely. And then in my spare time, I run music festivals, and that's the work that my wife is also involved in, and managing other projects. And that is all remote work because they're in different locations anyway, and the teams are not that we work with are not co-located, so we can be anywhere to do that work.
Oh, that sounds really convenient and flexible. So, do you actually pay taxes to England or in England, or because you're a freelancer, but you work for companies in England or in Germany?
Work for companies in England, in Croatia, in other different countries. We started paying tax in Germany when we moved here permanently. So we used to pay tax in the UK when we first got here. Then when we decided, yeah, actually we want to live there full time, we kind of cancelled our tax identity, if you like, in the UK. And for a bit we had both. And then, you know, we moved everything over to here. We still have a company there that is still sort of paying UK tax, but we're in the process of kind of winding down everything in the UK and moving here permanently.
And what would you say to people who maybe wants to follow your path? Was it easy? Was it time consuming to transfer everything from the UK to Germany?
No, it wasn't really. And maybe that's because I've gone between 2 EU countries. Well, at the moment, 2 EU countries. UK won't be one for long, unfortunately,
Yes.
in my opinion. But yeah, that because we went between 2 EU countries, a lot of that stuff was easy. You know, a lot of the stuff that you need to feel secure and get your life up and running. You know, like your banking or you know, having your mobile phone and stuff like that, because you're moving between 2 EU countries. You know, for example, I have bank cards where they don't charge me to take out money or use it in the EU. And, you know, we have the law now of mobile phone contracts. I have to be able to use it in the EU. So this made things easier than it was, you know, when I went on the student exchange or you know, stuff like that before. There was a lot more bureaucracy even to get these basic things set up, like, you know, get a mobile phone. A contract.
Mm-hmm. And what about the healthcare? Because we know in England we've got NHS, which is well, I don't want to say an opinion about it, but it works, and you get healthcare, you get basic healthcare covered. Is it the same in Germany?
The healthcare system works a little differently in Germany, but I think the coverage and you know, I've only been living here since January permanently. I haven't actually even used the doctor in Germany yet because I'm quite bad at going to doctors. But the coverage, as I understand it, is just as good as in the UK, but the way you pay is different. So It's not that, you know, you get like a big lump of national insurance or whatever taken out of your wages automatically, and part of that covers, and taxes, part of that covers the NHS. You actually pay to a healthcare provider, and you have a choice between whether you want to pay to a public provider or whether you want to pay towards a private provider. And there is a lot of choice, and everything is very open about what you get on both sides. For some people, it can be a little bit bewildering, overwhelming, like which one to choose. They have two options. One is take some advice from someone. I spoke to my German accountant. You know, one of the first things I did was get one, and I just said, who do you use? And he told me about his experiences and says, I really recommend this. So we went with that. The other is, in a lot of places when you have a German employer, they often have one that they are connected to perhaps, but they will make contributions kind of on your behalf, and you will also make a contribution, so you will share it. I'm a freelancer, so there's nobody else making a contribution for me. I just make a bigger one myself.
Oh, I see. It's a very interesting concept. I think it could work in England as well, because it's good that you can choose, isn't it?
Yeah, you can choose, and according to, you know, different healthcare providers, one will say, you know, we will give you a discount, for example, my one, if you take a gym membership, because it's about prevention, you know, so we'll give you cheaper health insurance if you're looking after yourself. Another one will say, you know, we will cover anything to do with your teeth. So if you want to get some extra stuff done or whatever, we will cover that. Everyone has its own, you know, benefits or advantages, and then it's like shopping, you know. But whichever one you choose, as I understand it, you know, I might have something wrong here. There is some like basic level of cover which they all have to offer. And, you know, you just choose a doctor with my one, you go to see them, and they all know the rules. So I don't have to pay them first and get the money back. Like the NHS, I just go and see them. And before they make a treatment for me, they will tell me, okay, this one is covered and this one you would have to pay for yourself. Do you want it or not? And then it's your choice. I think it's a good system so far.
Hopefully you don't have to use it much.
Well, I made an appointment the other day, so maybe on the later on I'll be able to give some feedback how actually was it in practice.
That would be great. So you meet loads of other expats, let's say, or other foreigners who live in Berlin. After talking to them and based on your experiences, what would you say about job opportunities in Berlin? Is it easy to find a job? What do you think? What have you heard?
I might have a slightly biased opinion because of the work that I'm involved in. As I said, my main work is in the tech industry, and then, you know, my freelance stuff is in music, and both of those sectors are quite vibrant in Berlin. So if you're a developer, for example, you work in the tech industry, maybe a designer or whatever, you will find work very easily in Berlin, because it's, you know, according to some people at least, the tech startup capital of Europe. So many companies springing up with new ideas and products and stuff all the time who need workers. Even Google, I think it is, have just set up or are setting up a new campus in Berlin in Kreuzberg. So big tech companies like that are now making Berlin a kind of European base. And I imagine there will be even more of that now. People are probably leaving tech companies. Also in the music scene, creatively, the arts and music, like there's a lot going on in Berlin. And one of the things about Berlin is that most people are speaking English, actually, which is kind of a double-edged blade, you know. On the one hand, it makes it really easy for me with English as my mother tongue to integrate, and lots of people like you, for example, I'm always really impressed with people who speak English fluently as their, you know, second language, and they can just move there and start. The flip side is it made it hard for me so far to learn German, because it's too easy, you know, just to speak English.
Yes, of course. If everyone understands you, why would you try to make it harder for yourself, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting. I try because I feel like you, in my personal opinion, you can't really understand the culture of a country or a place 100% until you understand some of the language, because some things don't translate, you know, and you get
Yes.
to find out about people's personality with the language. But when I try to speak German, maybe I speak with a really bad English accent, or maybe some people catch that it's not my native tongue and they want to try to practice their English, which I understand. So normally the conversation ends up going to English, even if I try to speak German.
But have you actually studied German before moving there?
I did a year in high school when I was like 14. So that was like over 20 years ago. Not so I would say no, not really.
That doesn't count.
No, it doesn't count. Although I got the apps, you know, like there's a few good language apps. I don't know if I can name check them, but there's a few good ones that I used to practice with before I came. When we first came, my wife actually went to Volkshochschule to learn German, went to a German course. So her German is much better.
Was it actually supported by the government? I'm wondering if they want to help people to learn German, or was it a private class that you have to pay for?
Absolutely. It was a class in the Volkshochschule, so it's like in the UK we would call it like a college of education. And as I understand it, at least, the courses at the Volkshochschule are subsidized. It must be somehow because the price was so reasonable. I can't remember the exact thing, but for a whole semester, it was like 200 euros, and she was going like 3 days a week for like 4 hours. It was like a lot of tuition, but not very much. You also have some private options. They are more expensive, but then the flip side is, you know, you have the one-on-one time with the teacher. But she had a very good experience with her Volkshochschule, and the price was very reasonable. It took a little bit of time for her to get into the course. There was a bit of a waiting list. I think it was because at the time there were a lot of new migrants in Berlin, and obviously it was very important to them to try to learn German, so there was a bit of queuing. But the value was great and really supportive.
Oh, that's good to hear. So if I move to Germany, I definitely go to Berlin then. It sounds great.
Highly recommend it.
And what about your family? How did they react to this decision? Did they support you guys?
Eventually. I think our parents, certainly our mums, were a bit concerned, we could say, like about the contact and, you know, are we going to see you? And, you know, it's very far away. What if something happens? And so there was, in the early days, you know, it's human nature with any big change, you know, to your life or your family or your routine, it's a shock. And so the early days were about putting their mind at rest, their concerns. Maybe, and this was maybe the same with work, actually, with my day job. You know, there was a bit of concern, like, how is it going to work? You're going to be far away. What if you need you urgently? And so the early days with family and with work, I think, was about over communication. You know, so if I normally speak to my mum once a week, then I call her now 3 times a week or twice a week. So she feels really, oh, he's close, or he's closer than before. And then you can kind of relax as everyone gets used to the situation. And we brought them also because we're not so far, you know, travel is not so expensive. You know, in the early days, our parents came for, you know, a weekend. Oh, this is where we live, and this is where we buy groceries and stuff. So everything starts to feel more normal for them.
Oh, that's really good. How long is the flight between the UK and Berlin? It must be very short.
Hour and a half with good wind.
Oh yeah, that's nothing really, is it? So quick.
Yeah. Nothing at all. Really.
And I assume the internet and the phone is working fine, so you have no problem contacting your work or your family ever.
we have no problem contacting them. Internet, actually, this is the one of the very big minus points I must talk about. I can't speak about the rest of Germany, but the internet infrastructure here in Berlin is not very good. Like, so you do have some problems. I would say every 3 months or something, you have some problem one day with the internet, and then they resolve it later in the day, but that's a bit annoying. But I know that's something actively which the government and their opponents at the moment are all debating about. How will we make the internet better and stuff? So they're working on it, but right now it's not 10 out of 10.
Oh, okay. Well, to be honest, I lived in a few countries, and it was hardly ever 10 out of 10.
Sure.
So, yes, sorry.
Yeah, it's a solid 7. It's a solid 7.
Oh, I see. I see. Have you actually traveled around in Germany, anywhere else apart from Berlin?
No, we haven't yet, unfortunately. We've done a bit in Brandenburg, which is the, I guess, the state which surrounds Berlin. Berlin is technically its own state. So we've been just out of Berlin city limits to some countryside and some lakes and stuff here and there. But we have been explicitly saying that we want to go and do some more domestic holidays. There are lots of beautiful places. We would like to go down to the Black Forest. There are some beautiful spa towns near the Czech border, one called Bad Schandau, which is really beautiful every time you pass on the train. We would like to do some of that stuff for sure.
Oh, yeah, actually, traveling reminds me of getting around. How is it? Is it easy to get around in the city of Berlin on public transport, or do you have a car? How do you travel?
So it's very easy, is the short answer to your question, to get around in Berlin. Very convenient and very cheap. The slightly longer answer is that, you know, I always compare it to what I know. So the public transport, for example, compared to the UK, to London, it just works and it's a reasonable price. You know, the trains usually 9 times out of 10, they are there when you expect them to be there, 9.5 times out of 10.
That's already better than in London.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. London is a catastrophe compared to Berlin when it comes to public transport. Another thing that and there are multiple modes of transport in Berlin. So you have the underground, you have trams very close to the center and some parts in the east. You have buses, and then you have the 2 types of overground train. One's the S-Bahn, which is just kind of the suburban train, and one is the Regionalbahn and the intercities, which go between cities or throughout the region. They go a bit further away. So we've got, like, you know, 4 modes of transport. And then, of course, you mentioned cars. That's another point I can compare to London. We have a fantastic, or 2 fantastic car sharing schemes. I think there are more, but there are 2 big ones. One is called Car2Go, which I think is also in some other cities in Germany and some other countries in North America and Europe. And you have another one called Drive Now. And the basic premise is a giant car sharing app where you can look on a map, and there are lots of cars just hanging around in your neighborhood with the keys inside, and you select a car, you go reserve that car for 20 minutes, you go to that car and you open it with your phone, and then you drive it for as long as you want. And then when you finished, wherever you are in Berlin, then you just park the car there and close it again with your phone and finish.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. So the 2 big companies are backed by, I think it's Daimler, isn't it? The Mercedes company, and BMW. So the cars are a great selection, Mercedes and smart cars, or BMWs and stuff. And you're paying, you know, for the cheapest one, for the smart car, like 25, 26 cents per minute, which is not bad. And everything is included. The insurance, you don't pay the petrol, you don't pay the cleaning, like they handle all of that. You just look in your neighborhood, pick the car, go to your, you know, if you're going for a drink, let's say, you drive to the bar, you leave it outside, and then you can get the S-Bahn home. It's very convenient.
So they literally just check how long you're using the car.
Yeah, they check how long you're using the car and the time when you close the car. If the keys are inside, because you can actually keep the keys and lock the car and do your shopping and whatever. You can treat it like your car, or you can just make the journey. You leave the keys inside and you close the door. It automatically locks, and then it says, "Oh, you were 30 minutes in the car," and they do, 30 times 26 cents, and they just take it from your bank automatically.
Oh, I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, it's very nice. If you think about the short-term period where you drive, it sounds expensive, but then if you think about all of the other running costs of having your own car, like you might have to pay the parking permit, you might have to pay the maintenance, the insurance, the fuel, the this, the that, and then maybe 5 days of the week you're not even using it, only on the weekend for a couple of journeys. So when you add it over a year, it often works out better, and then you don't have everyone owning his or her own car. We're just sharing the cars, which is better for the environment.
Yeah, definitely. And so it sounds like Berlin is a really great place to live in. But is there anything you miss from home?
Oh yeah, for sure. It would usually be something about food or whatever. For example, my wife is really addicted to hot sauce, and there's a particular hot sauce which is in the UK, which she cannot get or hasn't found yet here. So she has to ask people, when they're traveling or they come in to see us, okay, please take check luggage and bring this bottle of this sauce and this sauce and stuff. So there will always be, your things like your food or certain the jokes, like perhaps the sense of humor is often different where you come from to where you go. There will always be these small things about home.
Do you have a specific food that you miss?
A specific food that I miss. I tell you what, is much easier and cheaper to get back home. Is stuff like coconut water, for example. Really hard to find here, and when you find it, it's normally in some bio or vegan shop, and it's like €6 or €7. I don't know why, but I can find coconut water like really cheaply and easily in like any store in
Okay.
Also, my family background is Jamaican, so there are a few things. For example, ginger beer. You can find it in some shops in some areas, but you need to travel, and when you get there, it's like €1.50. And at home, I can just find it again in any store, and it's cheap, and it reminds me of home.
Yes, in England you have these aisles, like a Polish aisle or an Indian aisle, where you can find all the food from those countries.
Yeah, exactly. They call it the world food aisle or whatever. And the world food aisle tends to change depending on who are the dominant minority, let's say, in that particular area. Sometimes the Polish food, the African food, the South Asian food. But yeah, I've seen something like a world food aisle in the big stores here, but the selection is not the same. And maybe there are not enough Jamaican or Caribbean people here, so they don't have the Jamaican stuff.
Fair enough. And what about the German food? I actually really like some of it. What do you think?
To be honest with you, I'm in Berlin, so much like London, we don't tend to find much stereotypically German food just walking around. It tends to be food from around the world. Certainly, when you look at the restaurants and the fast food outlets and stuff like that. I think, and I'm going to be controversial here, I think German food has a similar reputation stereotypically to English food, which is not that interesting on its own. It has some like really strong staple foods. There are a lot of like meat and potato combinations and sausages and pickled foods and stuff. But for me, German food, just like English food, isn't necessarily the most interesting on its own. I like certain English foods for like creature comfort, feeling like home, but there are more interesting cuisines, I think.
Yeah, actually, I like the sausages and the meat and potato combo.
Yeah, you know, they have those which are classic. Like you can buy like, you know, 100 types of sausage probably. And there are certain things, for example, in Berlin is, you know, currywurst is the typically Berliner fast food that you get, either that or, you know, a doner, you know, a kebab.
Oh, yeah.
The sausage maybe, but doner kebab obviously is, well, some people might think that's a typically German cuisine actually, because you can find it everywhere in Germany. It depends, I guess, what you define as German cuisine.
But it's mainly Turkish people who sell doner kebabs, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the Turkish population in Germany, but as I understand it, the Turkish population here is the biggest one outside Turkey. It's a very big and important minority here, and they, you know, first came over the Turkish population decades ago. So in many ways, the, you know, the second and third generation, that is very fluid between the German part of your identity and the Turkish part of your identity. And I guess in your mind, when you think about the food, I mean, there will be certain foods here, for example, that they would have in a fast food outlet that they might not even have in Turkey. There's a kind of German idea of Turkish food, in the same way that in the UK, when we eat curry, for example, which at one point at least, I'm not sure if it still is now, but it was like the #1 dish in the UK was curry. But you know, most of the curries that you have in England, when you go to India, you're not going to find that, because it's kind of the interpretation and the, you know, the
And
fluid.
probably not as spicy.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, or maybe less actually, because English people stereotypically, at least, are not as into spicy food. So maybe it's actually been spiced slightly down over the years to cater for the British palate. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It is an interesting question.
I think it is actually. And is it easy to go out and eat and have a drink, or is it expensive? What's the social life? If you look at the social life in Berlin, what is it like?
Vibrant, I think is the best word. When we meet other people, either expats or other Germans or Berliners, and they ask us where we live, and we say Spandau, they're like, oof, why? Because we're on the edge. Why are you out there? And the reason most people say that is because it's far away from the party hubs. And when people from the UK or other places in Europe, amongst our friends, know that we moved to Berlin, the automatic assumption is that, oh, you moved to Berlin to party, because it really has that reputation as a party city. Actually, we moved to Berlin to do the opposite, which is quite strange for some people. But, you know, there are very few cities with more opportunities to party than Berlin.
Mm-hmm. And is it expensive?
No, I don't think so. But again, I'm comparing to London standards. I don't think it's expensive at all. In fact, to be fair, I've been obviously in a few different countries traveling in Europe, and I would say even by European standards, it's probably only in the middle as a comparison. You know, I can still go into you know, a Späti, and I can buy a beer for €1, which is, you know, I can go into a bar and I can buy a beer for, you know, €3 or whatever and stuff. And that in London for sure, that's not gonna.
Yes, it's a lot harder to find a beer for €3.
Yeah.
And so, if you have you got like any information that you think you should have known before moving there, that you found out later and you think it would have been an important information to know? It doesn't have to be one. It doesn't have to be one.
Stuff that there's a lot of bureaucracy in Germany, and some of that, you know, I worked out just by going online. Some of it I worked out by, you know, asking other people, and some of it we just had to experience it ourselves and make the mistakes. So I think doing the research and maybe speaking to a native German about the essential bureaucracy that you have to do. Things like when you have to set up, tax ID, when you have to register when you're first here. If you're going to be here for longer than 3 months, you need to sign up for something called an Anmeldung. Things I think like this are really valuable for you to know at the start and exactly what you're going to need. Things like the SCHUFA, when you want to find the SCHUFA is the credit reference, if you like. It's a check, a national check of your credit worthiness that you have to take if you want to get an apartment, or if you try to apply for a mobile phone, they're going to check your credit rating. Things like this, maybe you don't have that when you first come to Germany because you haven't lived there. So you could take your equivalent from the UK or wherever you come from, and then you could bring that and say, okay, I'm not German, but here's the equivalent in my country, and it shows you that my credit history is clean. This is a solution that we worked out in the end when people kept asking us for the SCHUFA, but maybe if somebody had told me before, I would prepare. In the end, we prepared like a package, like, okay, here is some reference from my previous landlord that, you know, I didn't destroy his house. Here's my credit reference. You know, here is my contract of employment to say that, you know, I have income. All of this stuff, I would make a pack together. And so you can go when you see the landlords and you say, you know, here is my documentation, for example.
Did you show them all this documentation in English, or did you translate it to German?
I showed it to them in English because I was very fortunate to have to come across an English-speaking landlord. In one situation where we came across a German-speaking landlord, we didn't get far enough. We would have translated it, but they have situation in Germany where you're allowed to sublet, and also if you're allowed to leave your contract early, but you need to find the people to replace you in the contract. And the people we were trying to replace spoke English, so they just, you know, handled it with the landlord on our behalf. But I think maybe you need to go to a nota and have the nota translate the official document.
Actually, it's very useful information. Thanks very much. The next question is a little bit related to the one I just asked you, but now looking back, would you have done anything differently?
No, I don't think I would. And this is going to be maybe a bit philosophical, so I apologize in advance if I go on a tangent. But I'm a firm believer we're really satisfied, content with our situation and where we are now. And I feel like if you are satisfied with your situation, you have to be satisfied with everything that led up to it, every decision you made, and have no regrets, because what you don't realize sometimes, or what we forget, is that every decision we made, even the ones we think at the time were wrong or we could have done better, they brought us to this place now. So if you're satisfied with this place, you don't need to look behind. Like, everything you did was right, even if it seemed wrong at the time.
I agree. That's a really good way to look at it. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I try to, because it helps you to stay focused in the present, you know, like, how do I feel right now? And if I feel right now like, yeah, everything's okay, then everything must have been okay before.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if there is a problem, there is a solution usually. And yeah, if you accept that things don't always work out how you want them to work out, then you'll be fine, because you can never predict the future. So you can plan, but sometimes things just don't happen the way you plan them.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like, our disappointment with, not just with, you know, big moves like in your life, but with everything, normally comes from our expectations, and the difference between our expectation and where we actually are. And as soon as we realized that, you know, actually this is a good place, and my expectations just came from what I knew at the time, and now I know a bunch of different stuff, so that's okay. My expectations now are different. Then everything.
Cool. And so what are your plans for the future? How long are you planning to stay in Berlin? Have you thought about this? Do you have any set goals, maybe?
No set goals. We don't plan on leaving Berlin for the foreseeable future. It definitely feels like home, and it's a wonderful city for all the reasons already we talked about, and others. One thing about Berlin which is sometimes difficult is the midwinter. And you know, as anyone in Central Europe will know, when you get to midwinter, you know, the days are very short and it's cold. You know, at least you know what the weather is going to be, but it's cold and it's quite dark. And so there has been a part of us that has been like, okay, for 9 months of the year, Berlin is perfect. And how about for 3 months of the year, we try maybe to sublet our, you know, find a short-term let for our place here. And we rent some place where it's a bit brighter or longer days, maybe further south in Europe, you know, like Italy or Portugal or Spain or somewhere like that. So that's something, it's not an objective, but just an idea which is knocking around at the moment. But yeah, other than that, no plans.
Oh, great. Yeah, actually, there are some ways to, I think, swap homes. So you go, let's say you go to Portugal and you live in someone's house while they go to Berlin and live in your house.
Yeah. So now I just have to convince someone that they want to take my place in -15 Spandau, and I want to take their place in like 12-degree Lisbon. I will try to convince them.
You never know, someone might like the cold.
Or maybe they have some reason to be in Berlin other than the weather.
There you go. Yeah. Well, Carlton, thank you so much for talking to me and tell us all this information about Berlin and how to live there. I'm going to say goodbye to you now. It was lovely to talk to you. Thank you.
No problem. You're welcome. Maybe if we make it to Lisbon, then we can come and tell you something about that.
I'll look forward to that.
No problem. Bye.
Bye-bye now.